The next item is in the name of Deputy Michael McNamara to the Minister for Health, the necessity of HIQA standards, which are problematic for some elderly care facilities. The Deputy has 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Minister, I wish to bring to your attention, if it is indeed necessary to do so, statutory instrument 236 of 2009, which provides for minimum standards for healthcare. First of all, I suppose it goes without saying that the standards contained in this statutory instrument are greatly to be welcomed and indeed are greatly desirable. The standard with regard to accommodation which is contained in it is that the premises shall not use premises for the purposes of a designated centre unless the premises are suitable for the purposes of achieving the aims and objectives set out in the Statement of Purpose. The Statement of Purpose contains at paragraph 10 that the register provider shall ensure that residents are provided with privacy insofar as it is reasonably practicable to the extent that the resident is able to undertake personal activities in private. Minister, as no doubt you are aware, HIQA was tasked with developing national standards to extrapolate from that much more detailed national standards. But from that statement, which nobody could take any issue with, indeed, that all elderly people in care facilities, both public and private across our country, should have sufficient privacy and dignity to perform whatever functions are required. The HIQA extrapolated from that existing bedrooms which are currently shared have at least 7.4 metres per resident. Within 6 years of implementation of these standards, there are to be no more than 2 residents per room, except in high dependency rooms, which shall have up to 6 highly dependent residents. Now, Minister, I have to say that since getting elected, I have spent some time visiting the state facilities for community care across Clare. Indeed, there are 3: Raheen Hospital, Stella Maris and Innistymen. I spent a lot of time in St Joseph's Hospital in Ennis for personal reasons. I would greatly like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to the staff of St Joseph's for the excellent standard of care which they provide. That standard of care was indeed vindicated, and I'm glad to say that it was vindicated by a very recent HIQA investigation into St Joseph's at the end of last year. An inspection was carried out on the 27th and 28th of November. However, the fact that St Joseph's, like the great majority of such facilities across the country, is a relatively old establishment, it was found, unsurprisingly, that it didn't comply with the standard of only 2 residents per room. Now, while I was there, I obviously took the opportunity to discuss this with residents, and indeed a very close relative of mine who was there likewise discussed with her fellow residents. And it seems to me that there isn't unanimity among the residents of such facilities that they would like to be in single rooms, or indeed rooms of 2 people. In many instances, I think people prefer to be in larger rooms. Now, that is not to say that the standards should be lowered in any way. That is not to say that they don't want their privacy to be respected. Of course they do. But to extrapolate from respecting privacy to putting people in single and double rooms, exclusively in single double rooms, seems to me to be questionable. And I would question whether it is feasible, because it has been acknowledged by the HSE that there will be great difficulties in bringing St Joseph's into line with the requirement of single and double rooms. It's been acknowledged in Kilrush that there will be difficulties in bringing the facility there. Likewise, Raheen, to a slightly lesser extent in Innistymen. But I'm just speaking about Clare, but I'm sure that this is mirrored right across the country. Now, Minister, I don't for a moment wish to appear to be advocating a lower standard for residents in such institutions. Not at all. But I just wonder the extent to which their views have been canvassed and their opinions sought when it was determined that it was in their best interests to be in single rooms. Because many people would love to get out of private facilities where they have single rooms and to get into public facilities where they share rooms, where they have companionship, regardless of the reasons that they're in these facilities. A second issue, Minister, which I'd like to take the opportunity to bring to your attention is the way these inspections are carried out, and this relates to a facility which is actually not in my constituency, it's in the constituency of the Lascan Corla, but St Anne's in Woodford, which is very much on the Clare-Galway border, had an inspection on the 19th of October 2011, which was a follow-up inspection. which was, by and large, you'd have to say, very unfavourable. But the issue of fire hazard wasn't raised at all. A couple of weeks later, in February 2012, there was a further inspection, and the facility was closed within 24 hours. Now, I don't really understand how there could be no issue with fire in October 2011, and suddenly the facility is to be closed within 24 hours, which created a huge difficulty for many elderly residents who had to be moved into, some of whom had spent very long periods of time there and had to be moved at very, very short notice, which created huge turmoil for themselves and, of course, for their families. And the issue is that nobody from HIQA was prepared to meet with any of these relatives to explain how that came about. There seems to be no redress. Thank you for your time.
Ampara?
Thank you very much, Hurley, and I'd like to thank Deputy McNamara for raising this issue and for his insights and observations in relation to it. If I might just make some general remarks at the outset. As the House will be aware, the overarching policy of the Government is to support older people to live in dignity and independence in their own homes and communities for as long as possible, and to support access to quality long-term residential care where this is appropriate. If it becomes necessary for an older person to move to a nursing home, their safety and well-being is of paramount concern. We have to ensure that the highest standards of care are provided to all residents in a safe and secure environment, and that we meet the needs of those who require these services in the very best way possible. The Health Information and Quality Authority, or HIQA, is the independent body responsible for promoting quality and safety in the provision of health and personal social services for the benefit of service users. On the 1st of July 2009, statutory responsibility for inspecting and registering nursing homes was given to HIQA's Chief Inspector of Social Services. This is underpinned by a comprehensive quality framework comprising the Health Act 2007, care and welfare regulations, and the national quality standards for residential care settings for older people in Ireland. It is important to have effective mechanisms, I'm sure we'll all agree, to maintain and enhance public confidence in the delivery of quality residential care. Residents, their families and the public need to be reassured that the care people receive is monitored. The Health Act 2007 provides this with a regime designed to protect the public through an independent inspection and registration system for residential services. I believe clearly that patient safety and quality assurance in nursing homes is best secured by setting quality standards, reinforced by regulations that specify how the best services possible can be delivered in an effective and appropriate manner. The national quality standards that the Deputy refers to are an essential component in ensuring the quality and safety of residential care for our older population. There are 32 standards under 7 groupings. Those groupings are rights, protection, health and social needs, quality of life, staffing, the care environment and governance and management. They're patient-centred, providing a blueprint for the provision of a higher standard of care delivered against a set of clear and comprehensive criteria. In summary, the standards promote health, well-being and quality of life, and our older people are entitled to their effective implementation and monitoring, and for effective steps to be taken if they are not met. All nursing homes for older people, whether public, private or voluntary, are subject to the same core standards in relation to quality and safety. HIQA carry out inspections, as the Deputy has mentioned, across the nursing home sector to ensure that these standards are being met and that residents are receiving the best possible care. I think we'd all agree that lessons had to be learned from some very unsatisfactory and well-publicised incidents in nursing homes over the last few years, and from reports such as that of the Lees Cross Commission of Investigation. Our system of regulation and inspection was established for the sole purpose of ensuring safety and quality of care for nursing home residents. While standards of care are thankfully generally very good, we cannot and must not be complacent when it comes to the protection of our older people. And the Deputy raises an issue, I suppose a query in relation to one of the criteria, or one of the areas, one of the categories of requirements in respect of nursing homes. And he raises an interesting point, particularly the question that he asked with regard to the extent to which there was consultation, for example, with older people themselves in respect of these standards, because we can really only operate, and I know the Deputy would agree with me on this, we can really only operate on the basis of standards that are put together in a rational way. So they can't be nursing home specific or area specific. They have got to be national standards in order for them to be understood and for them to be properly monitored. And I can tell the Deputy that, as he knows, the current standards were approved in 2009. They were developed by a working group which was chaired by HIQA, which importantly comprised the regulator, service providers of private, voluntary and HSE, older people's advocacy groups, people involved in the care and treatment of older people, and the department itself. So there was that important, and I agree with him, very necessary input on behalf of persons who are directly affected, particularly people who and we are all familiar with the very active and effective, indeed, advocacy groups for older people that operate in our country. And I want to reassure the Deputy and the House that such groups who are well engaged in this issue were in fact consulted, and it's important that they should be. But there's no harm in the issue that there being continuing debate on these issues. But I want to reassure the Deputy and the House that it is something that was taken carefully into account when the standards were being put in place. Thank you,
Minister. Deputy McNamara.
I'd like to thank Minister White for his reply. There wasn't a word in his reply or a sentence in his reply with which I could possibly disagree. I mean, we all agree that we want to have the highest possible standards of care across our health system, for everybody in our health system, but especially for our elderly, who contributed to this state, who built this state up, who frequently created excellent facilities from what were workhouses across Clare and turned them into care facilities which any country can be proud, and the standard of care which is provided there is second to none. I mean, it's frequently, dare I say, anecdotally, I can say, and I realise that the Minister isn't particularly interested in anecdotally, but it's frequently better in public facilities than it is in private, hence the huge queue that there is to get in. But I would say that the patient-centred standards, I wonder if one were to take a survey of patients in care, whether they would want to be in single rooms or whether they would prefer to be in rooms of 4 people, 5 people, even 6 people. I just wonder, it's a query, and I wonder when these standards run out, as their time period rather runs out, they inevitably will, whether a survey to that on that issue will be done, and a detailed survey, because it is something that I wonder, based on, and I accept it's just my own observations, it's entirely anecdotal, it's not statistical, it's not rational, it doesn't meet any of the tests, but from what I've seen, I think a lot of people would prefer to be in communal rooms. The other thing with regard to independence, and it's very important that we have an independent body, but it's also important that an independent body is not beyond reproach, or certainly not beyond accountability. And efforts to get in contact by family members of patients moved from St Anne's with HIQA were singularly unsuccessful. Now, I don't blame HIQA for that, because they feel that to safeguard their independence, they can't engage in a dialogue. But there has to be some mechanism by which people can feel, if they feel aggrieved, if they feel that there's a discrepancy between 2 reports. And there is indeed a discrepancy between the reports. There has to be some way that can be addressed. And finally, with regard to inspections, of course they're important, but inspections, I think, have to be carried out uniformly. And there isn't at least a uniformity apparent to me with regard to these 2 reports. But I do appreciate that I'm bringing up these specifics to the Minister for the first time. And that HIQA is independent, so there's very little the Minister can do. But I would urge HIQA maybe to look at the uniformity of their inspections, and also to look at how they deal with relatives of patients who are unhappy with the results of the inspections, even if it was carried out in the very best interest of the patients. Thank you, Minister.
Conclusion, I obviously can't, the Deputy wouldn't expect me to comment or refer really to any of the individual inspections that he has pointed to here. But I want to repeat again that the comment and observation in relation to how the particular standards play out, as it were, in particular nursing homes. I take the point that the Deputy makes. I mean, it's not always clear, I suppose, when you see a particular situation on a human level, that the standards, it may not always be immediately clear to us if we walk into, for example, a nursing home or somewhere, that the standards perhaps, are wholly appropriate when we view a particular human situation. But I think that we can be sure and be reassured that the standards didn't come from nowhere, that the standards were in fact put together on a rational basis, that they do make sense, that people were consulted in relation to them, and that finally nothing is set in stone. And I've taken careful note of what the Deputy says, and I'm sure that there is a mechanism. I don't have it immediately to hand, but I'm sure there is, that review is contemplated in all of these kinds of standards, and it may well be that in the future the kind of insights that the Deputy raises here could be taken into account then. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister.